The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Welcome to the Cashman Mind, Body, Spirit Show. I think you kind of enjoy this little talk tonight because it's about memory. I think, therefore I am. So said Rene Descartes in 1637. He thought the mind really was separate from the body, that they were not interconnected with nerves and arteries. So he separated the mind from the body, but we know it's connected. I particularly know, since I was a neurosurgeon for 45 years, I operated on the spine and the brain almost every day. Our study of the mind and memory, the science has developed over the last few hundred years to a great extent. And they now realize that our memory, where is it located? For one thing, it's all over the brain, but there are specific areas, like the frontal lobe is more about cognition, the temporal lobes is more about emotional memory. The musical memory can be all over the brain, although it's more in the right parietal area. You know, this is the frontal area. The temporal lobes are here. Then we have occipital lobes in the back, which is more vision. But these are all interconnected by 100 billion cells, okay? And messages get sent down a nerve, okay? There's a cell that has a nucleus, which has the information of its formation, and then an axon, okay? Axon goes out from there and goes to a synapse. It doesn't just continuous all the way down to your foot. Okay, the periodical spaces called synapses. I'm talking about very small, nano-sized things. And the axon will release chemicals in these little vesicles, these little balls. Each cell has in them maybe thousands of them. Those are the messengers, okay? And they kind of bathe in the fluids between the synapses, and then they may go into the dendrite, which might open its door and let the chemical in. Sometimes they jump in, sometimes they pass right through a membrane. So it's very complex. And the brain is mainly made from fat. Yeah, 3 pounds of fat. It's mostly fat and water. Yes, so you can see that it's easy to injure it. A skull's, fairly thick, fairly hard, but you can break it. You fall down, you can break your skull, and any type of injury that you have to the skull. That's the reason when people are riding a bike or a motorcycle, they ought to be wearing a helmet. And I kind of wonder what happens to soccer players who are hitting the ball with the head, and it makes a 3-pound piece of fat and spinal fluid water shake. And you do that for years, you kind of, let's face it, there is some loss of brain cells. That has been proven. We have neuroplasticity. We can make some brain cells if we eat the right food, proper rest, reduce stress, don't drink alcohol, don't smoke cigarettes, we can build some brain cells. Yeah. Generally, though, we lose some brain cells every year. It starts around age 20 or so, and the brain builds itself from the day you're born. The brain really is not fully developed till age 21 or so. Marijuana smoking, for example, damages brain cells. So you can convert a smart kid into an average kid by brain cell loss if they smoke marijuana. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does that. If you feed your newborn a lot of sugary foods, it damages the brain. And as we get a day older, we lose some brain cells. But if you have good habits, and I teach you about some of those, you can actually build them and replace them. So to have knowledge loss, cognitive loss from a day old as a day goes on, isn't that can be prevented in part, and you can be pretty sharp into your 80s and 90s. But if you're smoking, if you're drinking, eating the wrong food, alcohol is very destructive to the brain. I was a neurosurgeon, so I saw a lot of people with the skull off, and I look inside. If you drink a lot of alcohol, the brain can be tremendously shrunk, and the patients don't show a lot of symptoms, but after a while they do. I've seen people whose brain was that far off the skull. I did, yeah. I remember seeing some where the brain would fall to the other side, because this part of the brain is going away and is full of fluid. The brain would be like that, and yet talking to them, you wouldn't detect a lot of trouble. Obviously, if you give them a verbal test, for example, and they may be having more trouble, than I think. So the brain's very interesting. Let's continue on this trip. Remember, there's thousands of cells, and there are many interconnections, and there are diseases of the brain. Some of which, unfortunately, is when we're born. Down syndrome, for example, dyslexia. Then there are serious diseases of the brain. You hear about Alzheimer's disease all the time, which is partly genetic and partly produced by the things that person is not doing or doing. And that's the one you hear about the most. We'll discuss that in more detail. Huntington's chorea is another one where they have abnormal movements, and that can be genetic and hereditary and a very serious problem. Ebbinghaus in 1850 to 1909 was his lifespan. He brought memory to the laboratory. They started studying it more, and the thing that he went about where are memory stored, specifically. But they're all over the brain, but there are some specific areas, like the amygdala, the medial temporal lobe, for example, has in it working memory. That's memory that you use every day around you. Then we have long-term memory. That memory has to pass through the medial temporal lobe and the amygdala, and then goes all over the brain. And it's dramatic when you think about it, like my mother, who lived till age 97. I don't think she really died. She just stopped. But she was having memory loss in the last few years. Her sister lived to the same age, had no memory loss. Her sister played cards all the time and listened to music and very social. I said my mother, as much as I loved her, wasn't quite as social or went out. She stayed home a lot, didn't read books. So I think some of her memory loss might have been because she wasn't using it. It was only in the last few years. So brain cells were dying out, but she wasn't building any new brain cells. That's sort of interesting. And but old memories, remember I said my mother, for recent memories, ask her what my name was in the last year or two of her life. She did not know. But old memories going years back, I could not believe the amount of poetry that she could recite, just like that, one poem after another. So I think in Germany in those years, they didn't have TV. They barely had the beginning of the radio. So in the schools, they taught them to memorize a great deal in poetry. And she remembered it. I bet she could repeat 10 poems in a row. I can't do that. I never could do that. Yeah, or sing a song, or words to a song from those years, from 1920s, 30s. She could just sing them for you, remember every word, but yet ask her what she did a week ago, she would not remember. But that's how the brain works, and we're studying it more and more. That type of memory called a non-declarative and declarative memory. And a non-declarative memory is reflexive. Like today, I played pickleball, and I've played tennis for many years. Sports like that, ping pong, whatever sport you play, people, even if they have memory problems, they can do that. They can have memory problems, yet play a sport they've played, say, most of their life. It's stored differently, and then there's declarative. That's non-declarative memory. Okay, and then we have declarative memory, where there's a lot more of a thought process involved, like how to cook a meal, for example, will be declarative memory, and you have to have a reasonable memory to do those things. I was a surgeon. To operate, you'd have to have declarative memory, okay? And remember, I told you those 100 billion cells. There's a cell, it has a nucleus in it, which has the information in it, how it's formed. It has an axon, which goes out from there, which will have in it little balls, which are your memory, thousands of them, and it releases them in the synapse. The next dendrite, which like that, and may pick them up and pass them on. And then this is based on ions, on minute electrical conduction, very low amount of energy, but it sends it on with flow of electrons. And as I mentioned, as we get a day on, we can have less of that. So, and our memory gets influenced by other nerves, like the limbic system. That's a little deeper in the brain. Will send impulses to affect your emotions. And the hippocampus, which looks like a seahorse, is the one that's on the medial temporal lobe, and our conscious memories go into there. There was a gentleman named H. M. who was operated on by a neurosurgeon years ago, and he was having seizures all the time. So the surgeon removed both medial temporal lobes because he thought that was where the seizures started. And they indeed did stop his seizures, and he was wide awake, but they totally knocked out his recent memory. they checked him many times, and he became very famous because we were then developing our knowledge about the function of the brain. So then we had the prefrontal cortex, which sends our cognitive ability, our knowledge, our past experience, sends impulses inside. And we have what's called the nucleus accumbens, which is 1 millimeter in size, which is on the posterior frontal lobe, close to the hypothalamus, which is about this big, which is a regulating system, temperature and appetite. But the nucleus accumbens has in it dopamine that makes you feel good. You have a glass of wine, you sing a song, you have some music, or you tap dance like me, and you're feeling great. Well, actually, neurotransmitters, hormones, dopamine was secreted and sent down the nerves to make me feel good. And if I might feel good for a long time, and that is serotonin. That's another molecule. And influenced by neurotransmitters or nerves from the hypothalamus and the limbic system above that. And then we have the smell nerves, the bottom of the frontal area, and they is a very large area. So we can send messages to the brain by something we hear, something that we see, but something that we smell. One of the major memory loss diseases, Alzheimer's disease, they think one of the first symptoms of it is loss of sense of smell, instinct, and then it can slowly progress over many years. Let me go here step by step a minute about Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common memory loss problem we see in society today. But the good news is, Dean and Asha Shahzad published a wonderful book, and I actually met them in person. They were in town, and I met with them. And they're from Loma Linda University out west. They've done a tremendous amount of research and wrote this wonderful book. There are a number of good books. I have another one right here, which I'll discuss a little bit later. I probably read 30, 40 books on memory loss to gain some knowledge. And Shahzad has in here the 7 stages on the road to memory loss and dementia. Let's go over those a little bit, give you some idea. Stage 1, preclinical, okay? He says that can last 20 or more years. But that, your appearance may be normal and you have occasional forgetfulness, but gee whiz. Who doesn't have that? Okay, at age 39 for the 46th time last Monday. Certainly, I have that, but I'm doing fine. I played pickleball and went to dinner with people who remembered their names and things of the present, things of the past. So, who knows? Stage 2 is mild decline. That can last another 20 years. Occasional forgetfulness, others may notice, can still do your daily activities. Other people around you may say something. But before I go on from there, I'd like to point out to people that losing some memory over the years is a normal process. But we can slow it down, we can improve it, and I would like to give a little warning here, little warning, okay? Not to make a big deal of it, it's part of life, okay? It can be advanced thing that may be a little different. I mean, if the person is belligerent and punches you, well, that's something you got to do something about. But I'm into people forgetting names. They can't remember your name, or they may not be listening to when they heard your name. And you can cause a spouse or a child or a grandparent to live into the role. If you remind them every time they don't remember something, you're causing them to live into the role. I remember a lady years ago, as I was walking in the hospital, she passes me to see the neurologist to get, I said, oh, because I operated on the previous week, a week or two ago, and I said, oh, she didn't have an appointment with me. I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm going to see one of the neurologists, and they're going to do a bunch of testing on my husband because he's missing a few words. I said, well, what's he been doing? He says, oh, he does the farming for my son. You see my point? You know what I was worried about? She's causing her husband to live into the role. If he is doing the farming for her son, driving a car, and having just minor symptoms, I'm just saying, my suggestion, don't test them. Because if they may come up in this test to the next test to the next test, and before you know it, they're doing something when he's functioning normally. Don't live into the role. Don't get other people to live into the role. All right, we talked about the two stages. Those are the ones you could cause them to live into the role. Number 3, mild cognitive impairment, 1 to 3 years. Okay. Forgetfulness noticed by others, okay. Maybe anxious, difficult at work, can still do daily activities. Well, you know, if he's punching people at work or not getting his job done, mild cognitive impairment, I mean, at that point, you need to pay a little attention to the situation and see what you got to do. Maybe it needs to be tested, but you know, there are also things we can do to improve our memory. And right there, we could have been doing them at stage 1, 2, but here it's very clear. Maybe, you know, exercise more, reduce stress, treat any depression there might be, get them to enjoy life a little bit. Maybe have them take tap dance lessons like I do. Okay. And then we get stage 4, mild to moderate dementia. That lasts 2 to 3 years. A formal diagnosis is often made. Difficulty with driving. Well, things are getting more serious. Take the car away because they can kill themselves or kill somebody else. And anxious, aggressive, withdrawn. So stage 4, I think we better start paying attention here. And maybe the things I will speak about later, and I already did, to try to improve things, may be more difficult. But you can help them write things down, put the keys always in the same place, things that would make their life a little easier. But if they're anxious and aggressive, I mean, then I think we have to look at this a little differently. Stage 5, 1 to 2 years. Now it's difficulty with finances, so don't let them do the taxes or do the checkbook, or don't let them be in charge of the money, or you might find out they sold all your stocks, or there's no money left in the bank. And the stage 6, severe dementia, that 2 to 2.5 years, personality changes, professional care is needed. They may need to be living in a rehab center or a nursing home. And stage 7 is the final stage of dementia, lasts 1 to 2 years. Difficulty walking, refuses to eat. So I think I've given you some idea of what memory loss can come to. And the beautiful thing that he mentions in this book is that a majority of the patients, if we pay some attention to teach them how to increase activities or take up activities or do video games online or look at puzzles or play cards. Remember I mentioned my mother's sister who played cards every day. every day she's playing Pinochle, a German card game. Late in her 90s, she had a totally sharp, normal memory. Was that the answer? Maybe so, but you can do other activities, okay? So it is important to kind of know the stages, but what I'm also saying, though, is not to overdiagnose it, okay? And so what can we have memories of? Sense of smell, okay? We have scent memories, and that's one of the first ones to go if you're having a problem. We don't recognize anymore the difference in the scent of the flowers or perfume, so they pack a more potent emotional reaction. And if they don't, you wonder there's some damage going on. And other emotions, memories are triggered by sight, sound, for example. If we have a problem with our vascular system, we have diabetes, for example, the small blood vessels get affected first, and that's sense of hearing. So it may not be dementia, it may be that they don't hear you well. Then again, you know, my father, as he was getting in the late 80s, went totally deaf. And I thought, well, it's a process of aging. And that went on for a couple of months. So I finally took him to an ENT doctor. I should have taken him maybe before, and you know what? It was wax in both his ears. Clean him out, his hearing was normal. But I just tell you that story. But one of the first things to get affected by vascular disease, commonly seen with type 2 diabetes, is the ear, because the small blood vessels are involved. Next is sight, the retina involved, so hearing, sight. People sometimes will have these difficulties and have no other symptoms, and people don't check them for diabetes, a major error. Type 2 diabetes, which are 30 diseases attached to it, I like to repeat and repeat and repeat. Get checked it with a blood sugar and a serum insulin. That's even mentioned in this book. And if that's the case, through proper nutrition, 80% of it, a little bit of exercise, maybe a walk, and it'll be gone in about 3 weeks. So the biggest cause of memory loss, diabetes. Remember that. Remember that. That's in these books. I always felt that, and these books are recently published. I've known that for years. An elephant's brain weighs 10 pounds. Yeah, that means he's a lot smarter than us. No, but he is smarter. He's dolphins, for example, pretty smart too. Okay, so they're a little bit smarter, but not as smart as us. Years ago, we're talking 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. Okay, maybe 750 years ago. We didn't have TV and things, and people really became experts at memory. They had tricks, and one thing they did, it was actually a theater, almost like a sport. They had memorists, people with great memories. Instead of writing books, which they didn't have available in those years, they would show off by having unbelievable memories. Unbelievable memories. And how do they do that? One trick was they would link to things, okay? They would take a word and link it to something in a room. They called them Roman rooms, and they would hang their memory on things in the room, pictures, lamps if they had them then, whatever. You go around the room and you hang a memory on everything in this room, and something I've even tried it. You may want to try it. You just form a room with a lot of things in it, and something you want to remember. It might be a name. And a real trick is to take what you're trying to remember and visualize it in an exaggerated form. Imagine and visualize an exaggerated form. Now, if your dog's name, for example, you might visualize your dog jumping over a tree, and then hang that vision on something in that room which you already know. Your Roman room is, everything in there is the same. You have it down perfectly, and you're linking an exaggerated image of that object, whatever it might be, onto something in your Roman room. That's called linking. And these people who were really good at this, they were famous, and they had unbelievable memories because they had practiced this way for years. Okay, and Mark Twain even taught his daughters this system of remembering who were the English kings for the last 800 years, and he got them to remember loci, and they could name all the kings one after the other. So so you can increase your brain performance. Here's another book that's basically all about it. Think Smart, a good book to read by Richard Restak, and he describes different methods of improving memory, because it's important. I mean, you are, but your memory, okay? That's who we are. So the working memory, remember I spoke about the medial temporal lobe close to the amygdala, and that's for information for right now. Things that are going on around you right now. That's what your working memory. And then we have the long-term memory, which is the future, things in the past. Remember, my mother had unbelievable long-term past memory, but ask her what day it was, what month it was, what her son's name was, she couldn't do it. Okay, so there's different parts of the brain, and we can sharpen our memory. We can use a Roman room, for example. We can repeat things. A good way is to, you hear somebody's name, repeat it, okay? And then maybe visualize it in an exaggerated form, and then maybe connect it to something. And as they leave, shake their hand and say their name again. A good way to remember people's names. I was never great at that. Being a neurosurgeon, I was worried about life and death. You're going to live, you're going to die, your kid's not going to make it, your kid's cured. I mean, these are really emotional, important things to me and the patient. So when they mention their name, I never listened. So the first thing I'm telling you, listen to the name. Maybe repeat it. Maybe ask them to spell it. Maybe when you get in a car that you write it down. I remember playing pickleball with my friend Denny, and he didn't know any of this, but he sure was practicing. I noticed every time that he heard somebody's name, he followed a definite pattern. And I think maybe at work that was required. Like a school teacher's got to know the name of everybody in the class. How do you do that? I mean, that takes practice, and after a while, I bet they really get good at it because they know everybody. And and another thing you can do is look people in the face. So your visual memory is the easiest and the best of all the memories. It's better than hearing it, better than smelling it, better than touching it, is to see it. So our visual memory lasts quite long. We may have lost our verbal memory, but still have a visual memory, and that's why maybe playing sports and things with visual, that stays on longer. So practice, okay? And coffee seems to also sharpen our memory. We can, if we're reading something and we're having a cup of coffee, we're more likely to remember it, but don't drink 10 cups, okay? So coffee may be okay. So another thing to improve your memory is look at every detail, look at everything that you're looking at. And I'm trying to play better pickleball on the ball shot at me in the middle. So I try to look at the paddle. I try to see the way it's tilted, and I do it every time. And guess what? I'm getting better at it. So and that also when I serve the ball, I try to make it spin. So I probably, when I'm playing 5 days a week, I am improving because I keep on repeating it. You know, I remember meeting a gentleman. I played tennis 50 years at age 39, and I did it. And I remember being in Naples, Florida, and the guy taking a lesson before I was taking a lesson, even at my ages. The gentleman said, "That's the most unusual guy you just gave a lesson to." I said, "Why is that?" He picked a spot on the tennis court, and he told me he wanted to hit 10,000 balls to it. I knew the guy's name. Why was that? Because I had read a book with the gentleman from New York. That's the way he practiced. And sure enough, if it wasn't that guy, the coach almost fainted. Yeah, he was from New York City, and he became a world champion player. And another way of improving your memory is to record it and to listen and to maybe visualize it in your eyes and repeat it. Touching things improves memory too. It's not as good as visualization, but it gives information. Now, some people can touch a deck of cards and tell you how many cards are in it just by the feel. They've done it so many times, they can tell you exactly to the card because of the height of the deck. Again, that's people who have done it many times. The card dealers in Las Vegas, they might be good at it. I know somebody in town that was really good at it, and then he'd go gamble in Las Vegas. Yeah, and he was good at memorizing numbers too. And that's illegal, actually, I think, but he did it, and I think he made a lot of money, although they knew how to look for that. And but as I mentioned before, in Alzheimer's disease, the loss of sense of smell is one of the first things that comes along. And improving your memory too can be done by finger dexterity. Can have value. So playing the piano is a good idea. In my basement, I've got a couple of pianos there, and I play a little music every day. I'm not great at it, and maybe actually I can't believe it. I studied as a child in New York City. I live in New York, and I can prove it. I played the piano at Carnegie Hall Accordion too. I have pictures to prove it. But I was never really great at doing it. I just repeated, rehearsed it. So when I still can remember me walking into the hall, and that I had repeated it so many times that I could play it without a problem. But if you had asked me, named a song and asked me to play it, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So I rehearsed it many times. My brain got it down. I was more busy playing tennis and baseball. I wish I had continued with it, but at this older age here, I've played the saxophone, tap dance still. It helps my pickleball because I'm moving the feet. I play a little piano. I listen to music in my car all the time. I now have a speaking thing, and all I got to do is, is say, Siri, play Adelaide, Moving in the Deep, like I did driving here. I feel good. So I'm playing music while I'm driving. I can do it through voice. I mean, that's something I hope makes this guy up here stay alive. So memory is an interplay of many things, of vision and touch and proprioception, and speaking and hearing and smelling. So we can, and exercise improves memory a great deal. So I encourage you, do whatever you can do. You know what I mean? Maybe not everybody can play tennis or pickleball or golf. Take a walk. I take a walk in the mornings, almost every day. I don't care how cold it is. I just dress to whatever the temperature is, and like spring is coming out now, and I look at the leaves. I look at a few of the flowers that come up. Birds are following me. They tweet at me, and I whistle back, and all mental activities which make me feel good, but I think maybe improves my memory too. I do about 45 minutes of that every day, and even the deer will stop, put their ears up, and wave their tail. I think we're friends. I have an hour right now. Not everybody loves geese because of what they do, but I've got a pair that made a nest, and I just kind of wonder if that, and I feed them, by the bird feeder, and I wonder if, I don't know if it's a male or female, they look alike, but he's standing on a rock on this morning when it's just getting light, and I'm reading, maybe preparing for this. He's there staring at me. Then I went to the basement the other day, work on the computer, computer screen lights up, but there's a back door with a window, big window, the door is a window, and who's standing there looking at me? It's the goose. I mean, you kind of wonder if not we're connecting, okay, but that's something to speak about. It makes me feel younger. Another good exercise is Tai Chi, one of the most effective long-term approaches to memory. Because it takes some thought, it relaxes you. You have to remember the pose. So I think that's an excellent way to improve your memory. Now we've heard of the Mozart effect, and how did Mozart get so good at music? Well, his mother and father, were musicians, play music all the time. But while Mozart was living in the uterus of his mother, she was singing to him, playing piano and violin to him while he's there. And in a genetic script of a baby, something called telomeres, at the end of the chromosome, they're not fully developed. And you can write the genetic script on there by doing this, by singing to them, by activity. And mothers who play music when the baby is in uterus, a great idea, because the genetic script has not been totally written, and is blank and is waiting for information to come in. Also has affected this genetic script what they're eating. Are they smoking? Are they consuming alcohol? that all affects the genetic script of the baby. If we're drinking or smoking and there's always angry arguments going in the house, that will be on the genetic script of the baby. They may be born addicted. It may be underweight, overweight, depending what the mother is eating, drinking, and the effects. So it's very important. And I said we can augment our general memory by exercising, by eating the right food. What I recommend now, you see it off my other YouTube shows, is a ketone way of eating. Good fats, 50-60%, 20% protein. You see, if you take in more protein than your body needs, you know what the body does to it? It converts it to sugar. Diabetes is the biggest cause of memory loss. And the reason being is that insulin that raises up when we eat sugar, in the end is to be degraded. IDE, it's called the enzyme. And if you're way overweight or eating high sugar foods all the time, you have a lot of insulin in your body. And the other job of the degrading enzyme for insulin is to degrade amyloid, a protein in your brain. And if there's not enough IDE available because it had to degrade so much insulin because of your poor nutrition, the amyloid then forms plaques and fibrillary tangles in the brain and increases memory loss, and that's the biggest cause of memory loss in diabetics. I would say 50-70% of memory loss problems are from diabetes. There are other diseases. We mentioned some of them, and we'll mention some more. But that's the biggest cause of memory loss is preventable by proper nutrition and exercise. And if you follow a keto way, it's quicker. I mean, and another good one really is to fast, to spread your meals out. What I recommend is 16-8. That's what I do. And I'm not hungry till noon or so because when you wake up, your adrenaline gets secreted, growth hormone gets secreted, and glucagon, the opposite of insulin, gets secreted. It keeps your blood sugar like this. When your blood sugar is like that, you're not hungry. I'm not hungry at all. I played pickleball this morning 2 hours and didn't feel hungry till around noon. Then I'll eat again tonight around 6. So 16-8. I didn't mean fasting for a month, for 3 days or 2 days or a year, like in history. Fasting has a lot of history to it. No, you spread your meals out. In that time, your body is cleansing itself, called autophagia. Cells are repaired, cells are replaced, brain cells are rebuilt, more brain cells are being grown. So fasting, not for days at a time, just time-regulated eating, say 16-8, will keep you a sharp brain, and you won't get all the diseases either. You'll probably live to be 100 and tap dance with me. At least that's my plan. Okay, who knows? But at 86, no pills, reasonable memory, play sports, read a book every 3 days. I mean, I'm just trying to, did I always eat this way? No, my dad had Dell in New York. I ate crap. I don't now. Okay. And so we can keep a sharp brain. So we don't want to damage the hippocampus. That's the part that's the medial part of the temporal lobe, because we'd have trouble putting memories in there, okay? Depression does this too. Depression has a big effect on memory, so it's important to avoid that. And but but you have to find out what's in good food, and some of my YouTube sites and books explain to you what good food is. Good fats, 57%, 20% protein, fruits, and berries, maybe the rest. But fruit is full of sugar, is full of fructose. It's not healthy, contrary to what you think. Mm-hmm. You need to learn more about this. And so to strengthen your memory, use imagination and creativity. Take up painting, for example. Imagination is helpful. The simplest memory exercise, repeat it. They give you the name, repeat the name. And so it is in shots I practice in the sports. I keep on repeating. Remember the guy with 10,000 shots to the safe spot? You don't have to do it 10,000 times, but repeating things is good. Let's talk about numbers for a minute. Generally, we can remember numbers going back 5 to 7, forwards and backwards. That's about it. And but how can you improve that? And if you chunk them, and that's what we've done in telephone numbers, it's kind of 4 and 3. We can remember the chunks a lot easier. But say it out loud to your brain. That's helpful. Write it down. Use visual or auditory reading. Remember I said visual is the best of all. And but you can check your memory a little bit by see how good you are by looking at some irrelevant numbers and see if you can remember them in the order that they were. But you'll find out if you chunk them, you're more likely to remember them. But that's a good practice. I mean, learn some method of linking. Remember, we spoke about that in the Roman rule. Take up something and become really good at it. I personally think we should teach that to every child, adult, that when we get a day older, we have some system in reserve and see what it does for you. Just a suggestion, and that's what they did years ago. And they had tremendous memories, but interesting, great memorists, if you take away the method they were using, the majority are just average people with average memories. Yeah, they found that in the study. Not all of them. Some are truly geniuses, but use auditory and visual memory. And so it is more difficult to remember numbers if you reverse them, put them in line. So remember, working memory is the ability to hold information online for later retrieval, but it's only good for a few days. Okay, it's not long-term memory, and we're better at numbers if we chunk them. Okay, the ultimate art of remembering memory aids visually. We can play video games and we get quicker. They found those people are quicker. Like my wife, she plays, before she goes to bed, can't sleep or something, she'll play a video game, when she may be with numbers or with cards. And I must say, she has an unbelievable memory, clearly better than mine. Did that do it? I don't know. Maybe she's a little younger, maybe that did it, but who knows? But some of these electronic devices, on the phone, because they're doing it every day, they're great at it. And but if you can attach a meaning to the word, you're more likely to remember it. But if you visualize something unusual, you're more likely to memorize it yet. And a book was written in 85 BC, the Erotica ad Herminium, the art of memory. There's a book was written, Linking Items to Remembered. Remember, we spoke about that already. And places and images, the Roman room we spoke about. One can do tests for memory and things we can do to improve them. You can take verbal tests, for example, to get some idea, but remember, don't live into the role. It could be with stage 3 or 4, which I spoke about. You may want to give somebody a test, but maybe it's so obvious they don't need it. But if you take a person with a little bit of memory loss, you give them all kind of testing and you check the steroids and all sorts of things, and you may find you're causing them to live in the role. But then again, if they haven't had a blood sugar or a serum insulin lately, that's important, because then you could catch that very early, get rid of their diabetes probably 2 or 3 weeks, and prevent them from developing advanced dementia. Alzheimer's disease has a gene attached to it, but I think they use the diagnosis beyond the gene, the APO4. Some people inherit one, or if you have 2 of the genes, you're more likely to get Alzheimer's disease. But then again, if you want to eat a proper diet, exercise, read regularly, have good habits, it may never manifest itself. So it is important sometimes to get some tests. You can do functional MRI scans, PET scans. PET scans are where you give them some sugar. The brain that's working over time will then light up, and you can get some idea. But if you did that and you're in stage 2 or so, again, you may live into the role. But then again, if you just don't know what a person's got and you want to work them up, to check them on PET scans, I think is important. So I encourage you, so to summarize things, I encourage you to we could talk on this probably a week, and I'll bring it up periodically again. But the biggest thing I would recommend, kind of keep track of the steps a little bit. Don't help people to live into the role, but get good health screening, fasting blood sugar, serum insulin. Diabetes is the biggest cause of this. There will be a few of you who will get Huntington's chorea, Parkinson's disease. A lot of times is accompanied by memory loss. But then again, these diseases can be related to type 2 diabetes. That's one thing preventable. Some of these other things are genetic. There aren't many genetic diseases of memory loss, but they're much more common in diabetics, people that consume a lot of alcohol. Remember, alcohol shrinks the brain. Every drink of alcohol destroys some brain cells. I tell you that. Even a glass of wine 2 or 3 days a week, I'm not saying you should do that. Probably get away with that because you will build more brain cells if you're eating properly. But if you're not eating good and you do that, you're just piling things on to, and memory loss will take 30, 40 years off your life. Diabetes will cause you to die probably 20 years earlier than you should. And the 20 years before that, you will probably have disabilities like kidney disease, which is 80% of the time is preventable. Most doctors, I don't think, are ordering the serum insulins. They screen you. Oh, I'm not diabetic, and all they had is a blood sugar. I don't know if you had it or not. Get a serum insulin. If that's under 5, well, you don't have diabetes. Okay, do that. Don't. I speak about that all the time. That's in many books. So, in summary, the Alzheimer's Solution by Chazet, a great book. Think Smart is a book I showed you already. And here's the other one, The Better Brain Solution by Stephen Masley. you might not have been able to see that. But the great books. Look at YouTube. Rudy Cashman, YouTube, 500 TV shows. You can get a lot of information out of there, especially other lectures like this, but one's about how to avoid diabetes, or talk to me in person. That's okay too. At the Divine Cafe in town here, I see people for free on Fridays. I'll be there tomorrow at 11:30. And I see them for free to educate people. I do it because I care about you, and I'm a doctor, for Pete's sake. That's my job. Thanks so much for listening.